My brother bragged at Easter dinner. Not everyone can handle a real career in tech. My grandma turned to me and asked, "Is that why your company just bought his?" You could hear a pin drop. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old, and I lead corporate development at one of the top tech companies based in Seattle. It's a role that sounds flashy when said out loud, but honestly, I've kept it pretty quiet, especially around my family. If you looked at us from the outside, you'd probably think we were a fairly normal bunch. We grew up in a cozy house in Oregon, had home-cooked meals, did holiday dinners, and told the same old family stories over and over again. But beneath that familiar rhythm, there was always a quiet imbalance no one really talked about. My older brother Nathan was the family star. He built his first game at 12, got into Stanford at 17, and became the go-to genius for every tech-related question. Meanwhile, I was the organized one, the communicator, the helper. I was proud of that. But when you grow up next to someone whose achievements suck all the oxygen out of a room, it's easy to feel like you're just there to fill the background. I didn't mind not really. At least that's what I told myself for years. I built my career carefully, quietly, without announcing every win at family gatherings. My promotions didn't come with parties, and I stopped bringing up work when I realized no one really asked. It wasn't bitterness. It was just easier to let Nathan shine and keep my head down. But the thing about truth is it has a way of making itself known, whether you're ready or not. And this past Easter, over deviled eggs and sparkling cider, the story my family thought they knew unraveled right in front of them. My brother was bragging about his startup's brilliant exit. What he didn't know was that I was the one who initiated the acquisition. I was the reason his company still had a name at all. This is the story of how that moment unfolded, of how years of silence came undone in a single dinner, and how I stopped living in the shadow of my brother and stepped fully into my own light. When I think about my childhood, it's hard to remember a time when Nathan wasn't already being called brilliant. He built his first robot out of junk parts from our garage before he hit middle school. My parents practically floated when they talked about it like he was some kind of prodigy plucked from a movie. I was 2 years younger, more interested in school plays and student council than circuit boards. I loved organizing things, writing speeches, and helping classmates pull group projects together. But compared to Nathan's gadgets and glowing screens, my accomplishments felt quieter. My dad, an accountant who struggled with the microwave timer, would sit with Nathan for hours, trying to understand his code. My mom, a high school English teacher, smiled proudly, even when she had no idea what Nathan was talking about. They didn't mean to play favorites. At least I don't think they did. It was just that Nathan's talents were so visible, so easy to label as genius, while mine were softer around the edges. When I won a debate competition in 8th grade, the trophy sat on the mantel for about a week. Then Nathan took it down to make space for his state robotics plaque. There was a pattern to it, and I learned it early. If Nathan did something technical, it was innovation. If I did something strategic or creative, it was nice. He built programs, I organized people. And in a house that worshipped engineering, that kind of intelligence didn't make headlines. He wasn't cruel about it, just dismissive. I'd show him a school project I worked hard on, and he'd glance at it and say, "Not bad for someone who thinks in bullet points." He liked reminding me that real thinking happened in code. It hurt. But after a while I stopped trying to impress him. My parents never corrected him with any real conviction. They'd tell him to be nice, but then immediately ask about his latest invention. At dinner, the spotlight always found its way back to Nathan. I became good at slipping into the background, filling glasses, passing dishes, and smiling at the right moments. The only person who ever truly saw me was Grandma Amanda. She was a retired math professor who had once taught at a university where she'd been the only woman in the department. She had this quiet steel in her, like someone who'd had to fight to be heard. I think she recognized that in me. When I was 15 and feeling invisible after Nathan got a summer internship at a tech firm, she pulled me aside. She told me I had something he didn't. That understanding people and how systems moved wasn't less than understanding machines, it was just different. She said leaders needed both, and that while Nathan might be the voice in the room, I had the ability to shape what the room even talked about. I held on to that. More than any compliment or award, her words gave me a different kind of mirror. One where I wasn't just someone's sister, I was Rachel with a mind worth listening to. Still, that didn't change the way the rest of the world worked. When Nathan went off to Stanford with a scholarship, the whole town knew. His name was in the local paper. When I got into my top business school, my dad said, "That's great, sweetheart. You'll make a great assistant one day." He meant well. He always meant well. But every time they looked at Nathan like he was the only one who mattered, a little part of me folded itself smaller. I didn't stop trying, though. I just stopped announcing what I was doing. And for a long time, that became the shape of my life. Quiet progress. Private pride. A family that thought they knew exactly who I was, until one day they realized they didn't. I didn't enter tech through a back door. I came in through a side hallway, and no one was really watching. My first role out of business school was in marketing at a small B2B software company, and even though the job sounded impressive on paper, most people, especially my brother, treated it like I was decorating flyers for real engineers. Nathan once said, "So you're in tech, kind of like the gift shop of a science museum." That stung more than I let on. But I didn't argue. Instead, I started learning. I sat in on every product demo I could. I asked our engineers questions until I understood not just what we built, but why it mattered. I stayed late to study user experience flows, read white papers I barely grasped at first, and spent nights taking free online courses in systems architecture, not to become a coder, but to speak their language fluently. I didn't want to be the best marketer in a tech company. I wanted to be the bridge between innovation and the people who needed it. And the more I understood both sides, the more valuable I became. Clients opened up when I could translate complex features into real-world benefits. Engineers listened when I asked about user friction or time to market because they knew I got it. After 2 years, I wasn't just presenting product launches, I was shaping them. I started sitting in strategy meetings, offering insights on what customers actually wanted and where the market was shifting. I wasn't loud, but I was consistent. I came prepared. I asked smart questions, and I saw connections that others overlooked. Eventually, leadership noticed. I was promoted to strategic marketing lead, which meant more access, more responsibility, and more influence. It wasn't flashy, but it was the first real step toward decision-making. Not just telling the story of what we built, but helping decide what we should build next. And somewhere along the way, I realized something. You don't have to crash through the front door to belong. Sometimes, if you know how to read the floor plan, you can create your own room. That was the beginning of my place in tech. Not because I fit the mold, but because I learned how to reshape it. The next few years moved fast, but I didn't. I stayed steady, deliberate. While others chased titles or made noise in meetings, I focused on patterns, on people, on timing. My first real turning point came during a product partnership negotiation. The contract was complex, full of edge case scenarios and potential liabilities. I was the one who caught a clause that would have undercut our long-term margin. And when I presented a fix, the legal team paused and asked where I'd learned to read revenue projections like that. I hadn't learned it in any class. I'd just paid attention. And from that point on, people paid attention to me. I was asked to lead a cross-functional team on a market expansion project. It was the first time I had to manage engineers directly. I expected resistance, but it didn't come. I think they saw that I understood the stakes, that I wasn't trying to control their code, just guide its impact. We launched 2 quarters ahead of schedule. The product line grew 38% that year. I didn't get a company-wide shout-out or a LinkedIn post with confetti emojis, but my VP took me aside, handed me a coffee and said, "You're ready for more." When I got the call from Cinetech, I almost didn't take it. It was a big company, the kind Nathan would have mocked for being too corporate. But they weren't looking for loud. They were looking for people who could spot value before it became obvious. I joined as a senior strategist and kept my head down. In 2 years, I was promoted to Director of Acquisitions. That meant I was now in charge of identifying startups worth bringing into the fold, deciding which technologies had legs and which founders could scale. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real power, real impact. And all along the way, I didn't brag. I didn't correct people at family dinners. I let Nathan keep the spotlight because I didn't need it. I had a seat at the table where the real decisions got made. That was enough. Until one day it wasn't. It was a Tuesday morning like any other. My desk had 3 folders waiting, all part of our Q2 acquisition sweep. I opened the first without thinking, flipped past the summary, and then stopped cold when I saw the founder's name. Nathan Harris, my brother. My pulse kicked up before my brain even caught up. I double-checked the company logo, the address, and the LinkedIn profile in the appendix. There was no mistake. Nathan's startup was on our shortlist for acquisition. At first, I just stared. It felt surreal, like fiction. The brother who had spent years reminding me I wasn't really in tech was now in my professional path without even knowing it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. Mostly I was stunned. And then the questions started. How much trouble was he in? Why hadn't he said anything? Did he even know we were circling his company? I skimmed through the financials, and the picture was clear almost immediately. The technology was strong. His engineering team had built something real, but everything else was a mess. They were burning cash too fast. Their customer churn rate was high. The brand messaging was inconsistent, and there was no defined sales funnel. I felt a knot tighten in my chest as I read through the weak revenue forecasts. It wasn't a failure of tech. It was a failure of business. Everything Nathan had spent years dismissing, marketing, customer experience, scalability, was exactly where the cracks had formed. The same things I had quietly built my career on were now the reasons his company was drowning. It wasn't irony. It was inevitably. I knew I had to disclose the conflict. So I walked straight into my boss's office and told her the truth. I recused myself from all direct negotiations, but asked to stay involved in an advisory role. She agreed, as long as everything was transparent and documented. I was fine with that. I wanted things done by the book. Still, it was hard not to feel the weight of it. For the first time, I was seeing behind Nathan's polished facade. And what I saw wasn't failure. It was fragility. His company wasn't doomed, but it was in trouble. And I was in a position to help determine what happened next. The irony didn't escape me. I'd spent most of my life trying to earn a seat at the table he believed I didn't deserve. And now that seat came with the power to decide whether his company survived. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth to have a voice, even if it had to whisper through spreadsheets first. I didn't want my personal history with Nathan to cloud the process. That was the first rule I set for myself. I'd worked too hard to earn my credibility, to risk it on a moment of ego or emotion. So I became an advisor to the acquisition team. I made it clear that I had a potential conflict, and we documented everything. I wasn't in the room for direct calls or negotiations, but I reviewed materials, flagged risks, and contributed where my knowledge of the industry and of Nathan's technical strengths added value. Privately, I prepared for the fallout. I knew Nathan would take the acquisition as an insult, not a lifeline. He would see it as a takedown, not a chance to rebuild. But I couldn't control how he interpreted it. All I could do was ensure we did the right thing for our company, for his employees, and for the product itself. Because the truth was, the tech deserved to survive. It had real potential, and his engineers had done good work. They just didn't have the leadership structure to support it long term. Every time I looked at their burn rate or customer churn, I thought about the things Nathan used to mock me for: user segmentation, market fit, and retention plans. The very frameworks he once laughed off were now the cracks in his foundation. I coached our team to treat NextLayer like any other target. We ran the models, met with their tech leads, and tested product viability. I pushed for fair terms, not inflated ones, no vendetta, no secret agenda, just the belief that innovation should have a chance to breathe, even if the founder hadn't built a house strong enough to protect it. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel personal. Every deck I reviewed, every team report I edited, reminded me of who we were dealing with. I could hear Nathan's voice in my head, still smug, still sure of his brilliance, and still blind to everything outside the code. I didn't want him to fail. I just wanted him to see that what I did mattered, that the things he minimized weren't fluff, they were structure. And without them, even the most beautiful ideas collapse. So I stayed the course, quiet, professional, intentional, knowing that the hardest part wasn't the deal itself. It was what would happen when he found out who was behind it, and what that truth would do to everything we thought we knew about each other. Easter dinner looked like every other year. Ham in the center. Grandma's rolls still warm, wine glasses, catching the soft light from the chandelier. Nathan was seated right across from Dad, holding court, like always talking about timing exits and market volatility, with that air of casual brilliance he wore like a second skin. Heather smiled politely beside him, nodding at the right moments. Mum passed the salad. Dad looked impressed. I sat farther down the table next to Grandma Amanda, who kept giving me side glances, like she knew something was about to crack open. Nathan lifted his glass mid-sentence. To successful exits and knowing when to walk away with the win. He grinned as if the deal was a masterstroke of foresight. I stayed quiet. Just watched him spin a story that wasn't his to control anymore. He went on about strategic positioning and building value. He used words like leverage and optimization, sprinkling them like confetti. He made it sound like the acquisition had been his idea from the beginning. A clean, perfect move by a founder who knew the game. Then Grandma Amanda set her fork down and asked, calm as a whisper, "Is that why Rachel's company bought his silence, dropped across the table like a stone in water?" It rippled outward, slow at first, then deep. Nathan's face froze, his hand still holding the glass lowered an inch. I felt every pair of eyes swing toward me. Dad blinked. Mum looked confused. Heather stopped moving altogether. Nathan turned to me, his voice sharp with disbelief. "What is she talking about?" I met his eyes and kept my voice level. "I'm the director of acquisitions at Cinetech. I flagged your company for review. I wasn't part of direct talks, but yes, I knew." His mouth opened, then shut again. He looked around like the air had thinned. "No. You're in marketing. You make brochures." "I used to," I said. "That was 9 years ago." "You never said anything," he snapped. "Not once. You let me sit here." "You never asked," I cut in. "Not once in all these years have you asked what I actually do." He pushed his chair back, wood scraping the floor. "This is a setup. You wanted this. You wanted to humiliate me." I kept my voice steady. I didn't want anything but the truth to be known. "Your company was failing. The acquisition saved it." He laughed, bitter and loud. "You think I needed saving? Your team missed 3 payroll cycles. Your burn rate was unsustainable. Your engineers built something great, but you didn't know how to scale it. That's not failure. That's mismanagement. He looked like he might explode, then saw the room watching. Heather stared at her plate. Dad looked torn. Mum had her napkin twisted tight in her lap. The story they thought they knew had fallen apart in less than 5 minutes. Grandma Amanda sipped her water, eyes calm. Peace, built on silence, isn't peace, she murmured. I looked at Nathan and added softly, I never wanted to outshine you. I just stopped shrinking to fit your version of success. He didn't respond. He walked out the front door, slamming a second later, and in the stunned silence that followed, I realized for the first time I wasn't in the shadow anymore. I was standing right where I belonged, and everyone finally saw it. I found him sitting on the porch steps, arms resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the street, like it might offer an escape. The air was cooler out here, quiet except for the low hum of a passing car in the distance. I sat down beside him, not too close, just enough to let him know I wasn't there to gloat. He didn't look at me, but his jaw tightened. You could have warned me. His voice wasn't loud anymore. It was tired. I took a breath. You never would have heard it. Not if I said it at the table, not if I said it 10 years ago. He glanced at me, anger and disbelief still flickering behind his eyes. So that's it. I fail, and you get to win. I shook my head slowly. This isn't about winning. You built something good. It just needed help surviving. You think I wanted it to come to this? He let out a long breath, staring at his shoes. I built my whole identity on being the smartest one in the room, and now I feel like a fool. I didn't answer right away. There wasn't anything easy to say. I just looked at him and said the one thing I knew he hadn't let himself hear in years. You're still smart, Nathan, but leadership isn't about being the loudest. It's about knowing when to listen. We sat there in the kind of silence that wasn't hostile anymore, just full of things neither of us had been brave enough to say. It wasn't a resolution, not yet. But it was the first real pause in a lifetime of noise. And maybe that was enough for now. He broke the silence, first voice low, almost like he didn't mean for me to hear it. I thought if I built something impressive enough, it would fix everything. All the doubts, the pressure, the fear that maybe I peaked at 17. I stayed quiet, letting him go on. When next layer started falling apart, I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that I was one round of funding away from saving it. But every time we missed a target, it got harder to pretend. And I realized I didn't know what to do when brilliance wasn't enough. I looked at him then, not as the brother who always overshadowed me, but as someone finally letting himself be seen. You were always brilliant, Nathan. No one ever doubted that. But running a company takes more than vision. It takes patience, clarity, and the ability to listen to people who think differently from you. He nodded slowly, not defensively this time. Just processing. I used to think your job was fluff, marketing, people skills, and business strategy. All the things I never wanted to learn. But I get it now. I really do. I smiled a little, not because I needed the validation, but because I'd waited years to hear those words and never thought I would. I never needed you to be less so I could be more. I just wanted to be seen for what I actually brought to the table. He turned to me, eyes clearer than they'd been in years. What if we'd actually worked together instead of trying to one-up each other? I shrugged. We can't rewrite the past, but maybe we don't have to repeat it. He let out a breath that sounded like a release. Maybe it's not too late to get it right. I hope not, I said, because we're better together than we ever were on our own. And for the first time, he didn't argue. He just nodded, quiet, honest, and finally open. A few months later, Nathan joined Cinetech as a senior product architect. It was a quiet hire, no announcements or fanfare, just a quiet nod of respect between us and a shared understanding that this time we'd do it differently. We sat in on strategy meetings together, sometimes clashing, sometimes laughing, but always coming back to the same goal. He asked questions now, real ones. And when I answered, he listened. Slowly, the team saw it too, that we weren't just two talented people stuck in sibling rivalry. We were building something real together. And in that space, I saw a version of Nathan I hadn't known since we were kids. Humble, curious, and open. Our parents noticed the shift before they admitted it out loud. Mum started asking about my work with real interest. Dad asked for my opinion on a business podcast. Small things, but they mattered. The balance was shifting, not forced, but finally fair. And Grandma Amanda, in her usual quiet way, brought it full circle one Sunday afternoon. She poured her tea, glanced at us over her glasses, and said, "Funny how the two of you make the best team once you stopped trying to outshine each other." We laughed. It wasn't defensive anymore. It was real. And in that laughter, something softened that had been rigid for too long. I used to think telling the truth would break the fragile peace we'd all built, that speaking up would ruin what little harmony we had. But the truth didn't destroy us. It cleared the noise. It helped rebuild something honest, something strong. Because in the end, truth doesn't ruin families, it rebuilds them. One hard conversation, one quiet porch talk, one second chance at a time.